You're listening to the Catholic Men of America podcast. Catholic Men of America is a professional business fraternity for Catholic men, and membership is free. Join us at CatholicMenofAmerica.com, and you'll benefit from networking and mentorship opportunities, find better employment, learn how to grow your business more quickly, and grow in virtue. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
GoodCatholic.com is a multimedia digital content platform designed to draw you closer to God, deepen your love and understanding of the Catholic faith, and help you put your faith into action. The folks at Good Catholic believe the fullness of truth in the Catholic faith can change lives, save souls, heal marriages, protect friendships, foster inner growth, and help each of us draw closer to Christ. They recognize truth isn't relegated to one sphere of life, it should permeate, transform, and motivate us in every aspect of our lives and in everything we do. Everything they create at Good Catholic is designed to help you understand the teachings of the Catholic faith and build a personal relationship with Jesus. Sign up for a self-paced digital content series, read hundreds of informative and entertaining articles, and listen to inspiring podcasts at goodcatholic.com. Today on the podcast, Catholic Men of America co-founder Jeff Kassman interviews Dr. Dan Schneider. Dr. Schneider is an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University of Steubenville. He is a former amateur boxer, U.S. Army helicopter pilot, and Gulf War veteran who teaches from practical experience. Dr. Schneider has a degree in business administration from the University of Notre Dame, a master's degree in theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville, and a PhD in biblical studies from the Maryvale Institute in Birmingham, England. Dan has worked for many years supporting Catholic exorcists, both at the diocesan level, and as a founding member of Liber Christo, a movement in conjunction with Father Chad Ripperger. Liber Christo provides tools and resources for priests and laity working to free souls from the grip of the devil.
Hi, this is Jeff Kassman with the Catholic Men of America, and I have as my guest today here somebody very exciting. Somebody's going to talk about things that those of us maybe in the business world don't encounter all the time. Dr. Dan Schneider, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on your show.
Yeah, glad to have you. Now, this is what we're going to talk about today is a topic that probably we don't hear about very often in the workplace, and Catholic men in the business world in particular might be a little bit sensitive talking about this subject. I'm glad you're here to broach it with us, and I'm hoping that you can enlighten us and educate the average Catholic man in the pew about what's going on in his life. He may not even be aware of it. And of course, as the old sayings go, there are the known knowns and the known unknowns, and then the unknown unknowns, and all of the different risk levels that come with those things. Tell us, who are you and why are you on the show today?
Yeah, my name is Dan Schneider. I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up in South End, inner city, Columbus, Ohio, and went into the military. I went to undergraduate at University of Notre Dame. Military paid for my college. I went to Catholic schools my whole life, kind of your average blue collar Catholic. Went into the military. I was a attack helicopter pilot. I flew Cobras and also UH-1 Hueys and Desert Storm, and began theology.
Did you want to fly helicopters before you went in, or could you just not get into the Air Force? What happened?
Yeah, no, actually, no. I could have turned to go to the Air Force, but I decided I wanted to actually fly and not let it fly for me, like the military. It's funny you say that, because in the military they track you according to personality types. The military does very well, and if you meet one, my brother was a Navy captain. And he's a surface warfare guy. If you meet one, you've met them all. If you meet one helicopter pilot, you've kind of met them all. The military is really good about that. So yeah, I wanted to I was hoorah, man. I wanted to go Ranger, Special Forces, and all that. And then after walking for days on end, I realized, yeah, this is not fun. So I changed course and applied for flight school and got accepted into flight school. So. Pretty exciting, pretty fun stuff. The most fun you could have without laughing, as they say. But yeah. There was a picture in the flight line, and it's a fourfold picture. And the first picture is your basic Army grunt, and it's standing up to his waist in water, and it's raining, and it's in the rice paddies, and it says, it sucks out here. And then the next picture shows the Ranger, and the Ranger he's all Ranger camo and all that. He's got his boonie cap, and he says, "I love it when it sucks out here." And then the third is the Green Beret, and it says, he's got the tiger stripe, the whole Green Beret thing. He says, "It sucks out here. I love it when it sucks. I wish it would suck more." And then the final picture is a Cobra pilot, and it's raining outside, and he looks out there and he says, "Man, it looks like it really sucks out there." So so that's kind of that's kind of the sums up the military and the army. But I've seen another one. It says an Air Force pilot, and he says he's watching TV and the cable went out, and he says, "Man, no cable. That sucks."
Yeah.
So I was a CAV pilot. I flew with the first CAV in Desert Storm and in Iraq, and kind of had my, even though I went to Catholic school my whole life, I really had my real first conversion experience over there. As I prepared for invasion. So that, and then later on, started theological studies on the side and worked on my master's. Swore I'd never go back to school, and then just kind of nagged on me. And got a local priest here, taught me Greek, refreshed my Latin from my Catholic school days, decided to apply for a doctorate program through the Maryville Institute in Birmingham, England. And that was, so I finished that up in 2020 during COVID. About the time I started my doctoral studies, a local priest, good friend of mine, asked me, he said the bishop wants him to become the mandated exorcist in the diocese. And he said, I'm forming a team. You're a military guy. I was an ex-boxer. And he said, you get it. You're a good formed Catholic. Would you be willing to help? And so I said, yeah, I'll go check it out, but I'm getting ready to do my doctoral studies, I don't have time. So after the first session, we did a little training with Father Ripperger's right-hand man. He's the one who trained us. And after the first session, I said, I get it. I mean, this was not what you picture on TV. And you really see, again, as a theologian, you see the beauty of the church, you see the glory, the power, the Latin is the auctoritas, the total authority of the church. And it's beautiful. It's a very liturgical, it's a sacramental, and it's very beautiful when you see it executed correctly by a mandated exorcist. It's very beautiful to see the weight, the hand, the finger of God. Even one of the Eastern, I think it might be the St. John Chrysostom, he says, "May the finger of God be upon you," and to see when the priest puts his finger on the top of the head, that the possessed, the demon will cringe in pain. That's the power of the church, the power of the priesthood. So I was all in, and just to help. And so I started doing my doctoral studies, and I started in doing this in the evenings and the afternoons, helping the best I can. And it was supposed to be a short gig. And then working with Father Ripperger and Kyle Clement, his right-hand man, they developed this protocol, and I started implementing it, beta testing it. And then now the manual, I started writing this about 2 years ago. And that manual is the Father has a 4-phase protocol. This is phase 2. Phase 1 is like a PX90, a good prayer discipline. Exodus 90 would be a Catholic version. It's a short burst of ascetical prayers to get the light. It's a diagnostic, actually. It gives us an idea of where they're at psychologically or spiritually. And then phase 2 is this manual. This book that I wrote is our phase 2, but I also wrote it for a broader audience.
We'll get to your book in just a minute. That's the reason for our interview. Father Ripperger, of course, is I think it's fair to say he's famous, especially on social media. His YouTubes and podcasts they go viral quickly. How did you get involved with him? And tell us a little bit more about that, the ministry that involves lay people.
Yeah, so there's various models of deliverance. You've got the more charismatic models, which are lay people can do anything they want. You've got the Roman model, which is a priest. It focuses on the priesthood, but there's no real preparation. The laity assist by praying. In this model, the laity work more as catechists. They work as prayer team members, supporting the priest in any way. Our job is to protect the priest. We fill out the paperwork. In this model, Father Ripperger, or the diocesan exorcist, he's your specialist, he's your surgeon. Your family practitioner is your parish priest, and then the lay staff are sort of the surgical staff, the assistants. I lovingly tell people, look, I know you want to go see Father, I know you want exorcism, but you got to go through You got to be this high to go on this ride. I'm Nurse Ratchet. You got to do the work before we're just going to pray over you. So what happens is there's a 30-day preparation of prayer to get us a diagnostic. Is it psychological? Is it spiritual? You don't we have to kind of take time and get better vision on the target, what's going on, what's happening in this soul. And then after 30 days, we start a catechetical program. This is a 12-week or 12 lesson program that walks you through to uncover areas of your life that your grace is being blocked. In all truth, the manual is really just a deep dive general confession, uncovering areas of our life and of your moral life, specifically. Where is a demon going to hold on mortal sin or even repeated venial sins? Areas of untruth that you're holding, heresies that you're holding, denials of the revealed faith of the Catholic Church. These are all areas that the demon can hold on. Areas of psychological trauma. These all need to be addressed because many times before we work this and we develop this protocol, we would pray for people. And they were in a state of grace. They had all sorts of unresolved trauma, psychological trauma, and there's no separation. There's 6 stages of liberation. And one of the critical stages is separation. So if you're not separating from the diabolic, either morally, through moral behavior, psychologically, if you've got some unresolved trauma, so that's going to be areas that the demon can hold on. If you have rejections of the Catholic faith, ironically, I would say almost every single case of actual possession, which are very rare. In the introduction, Father lays out the stats back before he moved to Denver, and less than 1/2%. So 0.5%, I should say. 3 people out of 600 that year he took stats were actually possessed. And so, but in every case of possession, or nearly every case, overwhelmingly, 8 out of 10 at least, there's one Marian heresy being held by the person that's being constantly projected to them by the demon. So this idea of orthodoxy and orthopraxy is very critical. Right belief and right practice, orthopraxy, right practice, and orthodoxy, right belief. And so there's always, I believe in real presence. I go to confession every week. Tell me about the Marian dogmas. What do you believe about those? Well, yeah, she probably had brothers and sisters, all that, Jesus had brothers and sisters, whatever. There's always some holding point. Oftentimes we see. So uncovering all those areas where the person has failed to yield to the revealed truths of the Roman Catholic faith. These are areas that also the catechetical portion tries to uncover.
So how is it that a person comes to this point? What's going on in their life that they kind of raise their hand and say, I've got a problem, or a family member, raises the red flag and says there's something going on here? Because for the average Catholic guy, hopefully he's pursuing holiness. He's got a regular prayer life. He's going to mass. He's frequenting the sacraments. In fact, our members, we strongly encourage that they have a daily holy hour with a special focus on mental prayer and weekly confession. Those are not requirements, but we strongly encourage that as part of a lifestyle. Who is the kind of person that gets involved in this ministry that needs help?
It's all over the charts. Sometimes it's very involved people. They're the church lady that does absolutely everything. I've had priests as cases. I've had religious lay people that have come out of Satanism. And people that are just like, I don't know where this is coming from. So it really is the whole gamut. The analogy that I use, though, oftentimes what marks it is a conversion. Not long ago, about a year ago or so, I went on there's a rancher asked for a little help. I'm not a big cowboy. Okay. I had a horse at the time. I called it my moneymaker, So I said, well, I got to get my money out of my moneymaker. And so I saddled up and I went out and I was just watching how these cowboys work, and you see them though. They've got the cattle running. They're running them through the gates, and they're going to get them all. And the truck is parked on the other side, and the cowboys are just kind of smoking and joking and drinking coffee. And all of a sudden, you'll see one of them. You can almost see his little cow brain go off and say, "Man, I don't know what's happening, but bad things are going to happen if I get into that arena and get onto that truck. So I'm going to make a move, and I don't want to play this game. I want to get out of the crowd." So he moves. You see his cow head goes up. He starts looking, and he starts trying to go sideways through the motion of the rest of the cattle. And as soon as that head pops up and he starts turning away from the cattle, the cowboys, they put the cigarettes out, they dump the coffee, they ride over there and they beat him until he gets back in place. And that's the work of the cowboy. And so that moment of metanoia, that moment of conversion is oftentimes what brings the diabolic into the person's life. They're lingering there waiting. As long as the person is living a state of mortal sin, as long as their marriage is a disaster, as long as they're not going to mass, or even if they go to mass, if they can get him to commit sacrilegious communions, he doesn't care. But the minute that authentic conversion takes place, that's what attracts the diabolic. And when things kick up, suddenly they realize something bad is happening in my life. But there's an old saying that we use that the evil militates to absurdity. So when we start to see these absurd things, and that absurdity might sound like houses that are like haunted houses. I mean, the house, suddenly things go absolutely haywire in their home. Shelves closing and opening, things moving across the floor, the whole thing. Those things, even those are allowed. Everything's 100% on the providence of God. God is allowing it for our sanctification. And so oftentimes it's that moment of conversion. Sometimes that conversion might come through, oftentimes we see it during sacramental years when a child is going through confirmation or first communion, because the more we sink into the sacraments, the deeper the bond, the union with Christ and the church hits, and the demon's going to do what he can to try to mitigate that grace and try to stop that from happening. So oftentimes it's some kind of conversion experience that kicks it off.
I'm talking to Dr. Dan Schneider, who's an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University in Steubenville. He's shared a little bit about his background, former amateur boxer and a helicopter pilot for the Army, a combat veteran. You went to Notre Dame for your undergrad and got a master's from Franciscan and a doctorate from Maryville. Is that right?
Right.
And we're talking about this program that Father Ripperger called Liber Christo. Did he found the program and he heads it?
It was done in conjunction with him. It was with Kyle Clement, was one of the founders. I was one of the founders. We had a group of lay people that founded it to work with Father to execute the protocol. So Liber Christo is kind of a Latin crassus. It's a generic term. If you're a Latinist, you'll hate it. I didn't create it. I wanted something a little more formal, but I'm a formal guy. But Liber Christo generally is the free man in Christ, to free men in Christ, freedom in, through, and by Christ. So it's coming through our freedom, and interior and freedom in Christ is what this is. Oftentimes in the deliverance ministry, they focus on freedom from. I want to be demon free, so pray over me, Father. And they'll do anything because they're suffering. But really, freedom from, if you look at in the Christian tradition, freedom from always means freedom for, and that is union with Christ. So we're freed from the world, the flesh, the devil, but that freedom is not for the sake of being free of those things or the afflictions associated, but for union with Christ. So our definition of liberation and Catholic liberation is union with God the Father through Jesus Christ. And that has to be in and through the sacraments, because we're a sacramental people. And so and if there's sacraments, it has to be essentially an extension of the sacerdotal priesthood, and not done by laity. So the lay associates that work in this model are working in prayer support and other things, catechists, that sort of thing.
And the reason that you're joining us today is because you have a book that I assume is based on these experiences, and you're sharing it with as wide an audience as possible, called the Liber Christo Method. Give us the overview of the book, please.
Well, I walk the reader through 12 lessons, and this is what the saints say about it, or this is not a tell-all. This is a tactical manual. This is a soldier writing a manual that's footnoted and imprimatur, but nonetheless, this is a practical application. So I walk through how to identify areas in your life that the demon might have a foot in the door. A lot of guys have the Father Ripperger's deliverance prayers for use by the laity. I tie those prayers into each section, how to pray those prayers. So, first it's teaching vocal prayer, and then meditation, working up to meditation and Lectio Divina, because prayer is absolutely essential. It isn't like you have this secret spiritual warfare prayer. Spiritual warfare really is just smash mouth Catholicism. It's just ground and pound. And it's exorcism. It's the imposition of authority. These are critical, but of course, the sacraments are front and foremost. Sacrificial theology is front and foremost. So you walk through different areas that we see in our experience are areas of blockages, areas that you've made complicit pacts with evil. Some people don't realize it. They've gone to the curandera for healing. They've done this. They've gone to the Janet Jackson thing. You got to confess all that first commandment violations and get rid of that stuff. Another big chapter on unforgiveness, a centerpiece chapter on the Virgin Mary and her role. Many people don't recognize the things that we see in we see in the spiritual combat, the testimony of the demon himself talking about the importance of the Virgin Mary. It's ridiculous to go in battle, and she's the queen of battle, warrior queen, and we don't even invoke her. Just a month ago, I was in a session, and the demon screams out to the priest. He's praying the litany of Loretto, I believe, and he's invoking the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary commands you, and the demon yells out, "I can't." Every time you use her name, every time you invoke her, she comes and she wraps her mantle around you. The beauty of it, of the power of the Virgin Mary. So I go into the Virgin Mary, into the sacraments, an explanation of the sacraments and how to rightly order your life through this to Christ through the sacraments, the power and the authority structure, why that's critical in spiritual combat, how to do Lectio Divina and mental prayer, some of the enemy tactics, the philosophy of the human person according to St. Thomas. So basically, I've taken Father Ripperger's Dominion and the science of mental health, condensed it down into a workable 12-step program for the average Catholic to read. I look at Dominion sometimes and I'm like, oh my gosh, thing's huge, it's scary, and it's heavy and it's dense. So I've tried to condense it down to make it more functional, more practical for the average Catholic.
Dominion is a book written by Father Ripperger for the laity. I know that there's a version for clerics as well, and you're right. It's what is it, 700 pages or something?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's very, very dense, very dry, very Thomistic, and kind of exhausting in the way that he works through things. So those who have a deep interest in this topic could certainly read that. But I appreciate what you've done, kind of distilling those things for the guy who's not an academic, perhaps. And one of the things that I'd like to know is, what is it that happens in the life of a person who maybe doesn't realize how they've opened the door, how they've given the diabolical, a foothold into their life. Things that might surprise someone who's listening, who thinks, well, I don't worship the devil, and I don't do tarot cards or whatever. Can you think of examples of that kind of thing where a person just didn't realize the weakness that they had?
Yeah, an open door is anything that exposes a vulnerability to the diabolic. Mortal sin is an open door. That's the obvious one. Unconfessed sin is an open door. Even suffering trauma, a door could be kicked open by somebody else, and when you suffer trauma from somebody else. So identifying those areas of psychological trauma and integrating them into your identity as a Christian through redemptive suffering. These are things, the way you close the open doors, but not. Yeah, most people don't do witchcraft and don't do these other things. Some people, obviously, a lot that come to us dabbled with that, but there's other open doors that can be given, even if alcohol, drug abuse, sexual abuse. These things can provide a pathway inward. Anytime there's grave evil, there's diabolic accompaniment. So,
and it doesn't mean that you were the guilty party on that end. You could have been the victim.
Yeah. So in my experience, usually most people can clean up just through good catechesis and return to living their Catholic faith. Weekly confession, really grinding out, growing in virtue, identifying areas of defect and vices, and counteracting with virtue. But there are two times that in my experience, which is not Father Ripperger, obviously, but who has probably the most experienced exorcist out there right now. But my experience in working with cases day in and day out, oftentimes when there's like incest, sexual trauma, particularly from a family member when the authority is abused. Oftentimes, and when there's an institutional element, this is when, out of justice, an institutional response from the church is needed. But most people can deliver just through a return to prayer and working through the knots intellectually, the areas of their life that they're not living their Catholic faith.
In your experience or the history of cases that you're aware of, are there people who look back on their life and said, yeah, many years ago I suffered this trauma, or I was guilty of these sins, or I had these addictions, but I succeeded in overcoming them, and they've been living a virtuous life, frequenting the sacraments and so forth. And yet still there is something there, and either they're experiencing oppression or obsession or something else. How often does that happen?
Yeah, it happens very common. It happens quite a bit where they haven't, because I go into this in the book, and we call it psychological compatibility. That when you're talking about closing the doors and you're talking about opening grace and removing the obstacles to grace, the main obstacles we deal with sacramentally through when we confess, through confession. But there's also other obstacles which are psychological in nature. So those areas of your life that you have psychological trauma, you've made unholy alliances with others in the past, and there's a psychological connection. So the analogy that I'll use is, you're standing on one side of the street and the squirrel's on the other side of a busy street. You confess it, and there's traffic, and that squirrel can't get across the traffic, but he can climb up the pole, go over the power line, and come down the other pole and get to the other side of the street where you are. And so those are the psychological ligatures that he uses, emotional ligatures, psychological connections to the past. Because, and Father Ripperger calls this the data set that is contained within the imagination. So he goes deeper into Thomas and intellection and pre-intellection and habituation. These are all Thomistic terms, but basically the demon can manipulate his data. The data set that he works with is different. Mine is different than yours. Everybody is different, but those things embedded into our imagination, which are often emotionally charged, these are the areas that need to be cleaned up and purified, right? And integrated through Christ. And so breaking those ligatures, cutting the wire down so they can't get through, these are very critical to, it's just spade work of the interior life to whittle those things away, to work on all those connections. I borrow a phrase, I forget the author, but there's a modern author, psychologist. He uses a phrase, if you can name it, you can tame it. And he's talking about the emotions. So the same thing kind of takes place. It's very Ignatian in terms of its discernment, identifying if you can name the emotion, if you can name the vice, if you can name the defect. I lack constancy. I lack purity. I have anger. I have impurity. If you can name the defect, you're halfway to taming it, right? And so instead of focusing on the demon, focus on the defect and bring Christ into that through virtue. And that is the way to battle back. You counter back. I use the phrase counter battery. When you get projections, counter battery in the military was the artillery, which we would receive rounds, and our artillery would have a round outbound before that round even came in. And so, so learning how to redirect some of the thought projections that you're getting to break that cycle of negative psychological wiring, rewire it by plugging back in through Christ and working on that trauma. That helps. That's very helpful and liberation as well.
You're surrounded by supernatural realities. There is a realm of mysterious beings who are pure spirit. They cannot be perceived by the five senses unless God permits them to reveal themselves. There are angels, there are demons, and the souls of our departed loved ones are very much alive. Are ghosts and demons the same? What is the Catholic perspective on invisible realities? Why is the world of spirits important? What is the supernatural, and what has it to do with us? Be a soldier for Christ, not a victim of the devil. It's important to have a healthy understanding of the invisible world created by God. This series will give it to you. It will help you understand the role of angels in your life and how important your guardian angel is for your soul. You will find a proper answer to the question of ghosts and supernatural phenomena. You will learn the basics of spiritual warfare and how to approach it. You will be reminded that the devil and his temptations are real, and that Christ has given us the resources we need to overcome them in his church. Develop a healthy perspective on the invisible world so that you will respect it, but not live in dread of it. How does it work? For each of the 21 days of this series, you will receive an email prompting you to read and watch the fascinating daily content for each day's lesson. You can also jump ahead, viewing the lessons that interest you, and going at your own pace. You can repeat the series as often as you wish for a full year. Visit goodcatholic.com today.
A lot of times when we talk about demons and diabolical and so forth, people think about possessions and movies that would come to mind and so forth. Exorcists that I have read say that that's exceptionally rare, but what is very, very common is diabolical oppression. And of course, there's a distinction between oppression and obsession. Could you talk about how those kinds of things would manifest themselves in someone's life, that, if they've got their early warning radars perfectly tuned, they would recognize certain signs as an indication that maybe there's some oppression going on?
Yeah, I in the opening section, I do a little glossary, and then I get into oppression, just explaining the ordinary and extraordinary. The ordinary activity of the devil is temptation. This is just part of being human, right? Temptation. Extraordinary, you have three levels: oppression, obsession, possession. And the demon works increasingly to the interior. At some point in obsession, the demon is now interior to you. Oppression, it's still extraordinary, but it's lower level. And it could be broken through prayer, fasting, good old-fashioned Catholic living. And so fighting oppression, it's oftentimes it can manifest itself in kind of a negative, this kind of pall of negative thinking, darkness. It can afflict temporal goods, water, the demons, ever since the Gerasene demoniac, actually going all the way back. Then I'm working on the second book on exorcism in the New Testament, going all the way back to the chaotic waters at the beginning. The demons love waters, and they love the disorder and chaos. When Jesus goes to and tells the storm god of the Canaanites, when he's crossing dead reckoning to go meet the Gerasene demoniac, he says, "Be muzzled like a dog. Be still. Be muzzled." That chaos, though, demons love water. So sometimes you'll see water problems, you'll see temporal things, the things that we share in common, this world, the temporal goods, that those are levels of oppression. So the business owners out there, remember the demon must respect the authority structure. If you own your own business, you have authority there. You have principal authority. And so a very good tactic for that is in the deliverance prayers for the use by the laity book. There's a prayer of consecration of one's temporal goods. So Father's taken this prayer of the Montfort prayer of consecration, and he's reconfigured it for the temporal goods. You consecrate your temporal goods to the Blessed Mother. And if you own your own business, you should do it every day. The page previous to that, there's a prayer called the prayer against oppression for one who's consecrated their temporal goods. So what you're doing is you're taking what you have by natural law authority over, you are surrendering it to the Virgin Mary. And now when the demon tries to oppress you, he's got to go through her. And she allows the oppression to take place. It's for your sanctification. And oftentimes I've known many guys that have been able to use that combination. It's like a 1-2 punch: consecrate to the Virgin Mary, pray a prayer to break the oppression for those who have consecrated their temporal goods. It's very effective, but it's learning as a man, as a businessman, as a head of household, how to use safely and effectively use these prayers and live out what God has called you to live out as a man. It's very important.
We've been talking these last few moments about oppression, the external ways in which the diabolical may work against us, our possessions, perhaps even our health. But as demons gain in strength, or as our Lord permits it for one reason or another, entering into the interior life, we refer to that as obsession. Tell us a little bit more about that, how it happens, how it might manifest itself in the life of a Catholic.
Yeah. So when I first saw this presented by Father's right-hand man who helped develop the protocol, Kyle Clement, he's laying out, there's three levels: oppression, obsession, possession. And there's three levels of, and within that, there's three distinct tier: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And as he was laying this out, I remember in my theological studies as Franciscan, the 9 levels to spiritual union with God from St. Teresa of Avila. And so this is when it really clicked and the lights started clicking for me, that everything the demon does is a complete diabolic inversion of the good, the pure, the holy, of what the Catholic Church teaches. It's all a diabolic inversion of it. And so as you picture the soul beginning in the three great ways, the purgative, the illuminative, the transformative, the demons work in the exact opposite. And so in the early stages, instead of purification, you have the opposite, and that's oppression. But as you move deeper into obsession, the demon becomes increasingly interior to the person. And they start to lose the distinction between the self and the person and the demon that's afflicting them. And this is where obsession starts to take place. It starts to get spiritual obsession. The demon in the military, we would refer to it as the wire, right? You've got your claymore mine strung together with wires around your perimeter, protect your perimeter. In the military terms, that's you're inside or outside the wire. If the enemy gets inside your wire, it's getting ready to get ugly. You're going to go small arms, hand-to-hand combat, fixed bayonets. That's the severity of it. Same thing, that the demon starts getting inside the wire at obsession, and by the end, the higher levels of obsession, it's almost indiscernible from actual possession. So it's hard to tell the difference, but the demon is calling the shots. There's no separation. Many times you're dealing with a case, and the person is, their personality and the demon's personality are just overlapped. They're superimposed. And so our job is to get that separation out, get them to separate out. That's how you start to break oppression or obsession. You break oppression by doubling down on your prayer, doubling down on your fasting, sacrifice. You break oppression through that. Obsession, it gets a little tricky. You still want to do those things, but you got to really detach from sin in any areas of holding point. So obsession it has variance. But I've seen people, in fact, in the development of our protocol, we first started developing, we tested it on a case of a young woman who suffered a very traumatic experience 10 years prior when she was in high school. And since that time, she had drifted into same-sex ideation, suicidal ideation, complete rejection of God. Her life was spiraling down. We started on this protocol, and initially, the book that is out now was stuff that Kyle and I were just working different models, and we would just take the Fathers of Mercy had this trifold little how to make a good confession. Have you seen that? And so we would just use that and kind of flesh it out. That was our phase 2. That was the catechetical portion. So we run her through. They do the prayer protocol, the PX90 for Catholics, so to speak. The whole family does it: parents, siblings, brother-in-law, sister-in-law. They all pray these prayers together. And after about 6 weeks, I start meeting with her by Zoom. She didn't even live in our diocese. We start meeting by Zoom. We meet for about a month. So she's about 8-9 weeks in. I said, hey, there's a priest over in your diocese that I know, and he's not afraid of this stuff. And we've sent cases back and forth. Go see this guy. Let him know what you're doing. So she goes to the parish, shows up. He's on sabbatical. And so they just got a fill-in priest, of course, So this, again, God is catechizing me and us through this whole process. So she just goes to confession. She does a general deep dive confession and was liberated. And I don't know what else happened in the internal forum, but she was liberated through confession. The ordinary means of a liberation, which is confession. Father Amorth says that one confession is worth 100 exorcisms. Confession is more powerful than exorcism, Father Amorth says. So she's liberated from an obsession, mid-level obsession. She was probably 6 months away from from possession had she continued down this path. Within 2 or 3 years, for sure, she would have been possessed. But she fought it off. The whole family prayed together, completely lifted. 10 years have passed. She's now married, kids. She's doing very well, successfully as a mom and also as a professional. She was liberated from this just by putting into practice good old-fashioned Catholic principles. So that was kind of the nascent movements of the protocol, and in the early before, again, which was the early way before this book came out. And so, yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And this, for people that are listening, when we say obsession, we're not talking about kind of the secular understanding of the term, or what we might just kind of colloquially say, I'm obsessed with something. We're talking about a demon's work inside of you, and your heart, your mind, your soul, oftentimes manifesting itself with images, ideas, thoughts, voices, influences that they don't necessarily come from inside of you. They might just suddenly appear. They might feel forced. They might be vile, disgusting, horrific, alarming. They might be formed of severe temptations and so forth, that really seem out of context, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean that, if somebody has a history of watching pornography, then it's likely that they're going to have images that pop up in their mind that are, kind of the crumbs or the leftovers of those experiences, but signs of, because we don't want to say that the devil is behind everything, right? We're responsible absolutely for a lot of our own sin.
But at the same time, there is a reordering of life takes place when spiritual obsession comes in. Just like when you have a conversion, at the beginning of your conversion, you start finding new friends. Some of your old friends, you realize I can't be hanging out with this group anymore. You're broadcasting, you're telling everybody about Jesus, about the church, and you won't believe my pastor, man, he can preach. You need to come to my church. My priest is a great preacher. You take down all the rock and roll posters and you start putting up images of the Blessed Mother. You're reordering your life towards God, and you're moving closer to union with God. You're praying, you're meeting with men's group. You're talking to everybody about this. That same broadcasting, finding like-minded people, now happens in the inverse during psychological obsession. You're taking down the religious objects, the rosary that you've had your whole life because you were Catholic school. You throw that away, you put it in a drawer. You take down the art, and you start putting up secular stuff. You stop reading anything religious, and you start focusing on secular things, and you start focusing on, and you start wanting to share your story about your own woundedness, and you're going to talk to other people about how bad the church is, and you start associating with like-minded people. You start manifesting exteriorly what's going on interiorly. That's part of spiritual obsession. Now, the danger, though, Jeff, is that you can have a psychological obsession, addiction, pornography addiction as being one. You can have a psychological obsession that exposes you to a spiritual oppression or even spiritual obsession. We had a lady who was the church lady in a small little community. She did everything. She was communion extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. She was DRE. She was a lector. She was everything to the church in a small little community. Well, if you're from a small community, what happens? There's a lot of gossip. So her husband has an affair in a small community. Everybody knows about it. She was so destroyed by what happened. She was so damaged, and she became so obsessed about all the gossip and about the shame that she was experiencing that she went, and I would say within 6 weeks, she had a spiritual obsession, because she was so vulnerable psychologically that the demon moved in and made the deal happen very quickly. And it began with a psychological obsession, because she was obsessed about, her view of herself, her view in the community. And once this was damaged, it moved in quickly. So it's very important for us to have detachment and to endure the cross when it comes our way.
Yeah. I read, I believe it was Father Ripperger, who said that he thought it was likely that 25% of all Americans were suffering from obsession. And I thought at first, I thought that just sounded outrageous. But if you step back and you take a look at where we are in our society, and it seems to be getting worse so much more quickly in terms of the perversion of the mind with all of these ideologies they're really religions, right? About sex and gender and all of the other things, the pronouns, and now people are saying that they identify as animals and, all sorts of other things. Are we talking about mental illness? Because that's kind of the knee-jerk reaction is, well, these people are mentally ill, and many times they are on medication. In fact, I think half of all adults are on some sort of psychological related medication. Should we just say it's mental illness and it needs a medical treatment, or are these people really likely under the influence of the diabolical?
It could be both. As Father said, that we live in a time of diabolical disorientation. We're completely disoriented, and it is psychological. It's psychosis to self-mutilate and change genders. That violates the very principle of that we're created to protect our species. The first principle of natural inclination in St. Thomas's language. So this whole idea of is dehumanizing man. It's diabolic at its roots. Now, how much of it is psychological? How much of it is spiritual? Again, it goes back to what we kind of teach, and that is there's a psychological compatibility. So you're seeing people that are manifesting, ancient heresies, ancient tendencies, ancient forms of religious expression. Deuteronomy 22:5. Thou shalt, right as they leave Egypt, thou shalt not dress, a man should not dress as a woman or a woman as a man, right? Because part of the pantheon of the Egyptian gods was one of the goddesses or gods that was the androgynous god, the great he, she, who was known as the great masturbator, the great he, she that could change genders. And so they had to reject all of that. I was just reading on St. Irenaeus this week. So we think, oh, these are just ancient things that we're enlightened, we're progressive, enlightened humanity, right? So St. Irenaeus battled against Valentinian Gnosticism, one of the early heresies in the 2nd century. And the god of the Valentinian Gnostics was androgynous. He was also a dyad of both genders. So we see this as an ancient distortion because it battles against the very nature of who we are. And male and female, I created them, right? In our image, he created us. So something in the male and female binary reflects the inner life of the Holy Trinity. So the demon from the beginning militates against that actual disorder. And so he's going back to the same old tactics. Father once asked the demon, why do you keep doing the same things? And the demon said, because they work, right? Yeah. And these are ancient tactics. And so on the cover of the book, it says we fight an ancient enemy and the ancient weapons are best. And so trying to get Catholics back to go back to the ancient weapons. Think about when I was in the Gulf War. It was tank on tank. We absolutely destroyed them. Technology, training, firepower, everything. So what did the enemy do? They regrouped. They took their uniforms off. They started using IEDs. They hid behind civilians. They used children, women's shields, etc. And they drew us into a primitive form of battle. And in my perspective, both as a scholar and as a practitioner working with priests, I think we're being drawn into a different battle. We've got to go primitive. This is why in this manual I used the as a kind of an overarching narrative Rogers Rules for Rangers, which is the U.S. Army Rangers Rules for Guerrilla Warfare. And I would keep getting kickbacks from TAN. And one of the rules is don't forget nothing, right? And they were like, "You sure it's not nothing? It should be nothing." I'm like, "No, it's don't forget nothing." But one of the things that his first rule, Rogers' first rule for Rangers, is every ranger is bound to the precepts and articles of war. And so as the enemy is going primitive on us across the world, we need to go primitive. What does primitive warfare look like? It looks a lot like Roman Catholicism, traditional Roman Catholicism. And I'll tell you something else as a traditional Catholic. I was speaking at a fraternity parish, and someone asked me, what moved you into traditional Catholicism? And I said, well, I watched how much the demon reacts to Latin and reacts to the traditional calendar, the traditional liturgical calendar. It's amazing when you start to see it. It'll wake you up and make you realize how powerful the Catholic liturgy is.
What are some of the ways in which a Catholic man could discover if there's a spiritual component to physical, mental issues, material related issues in your job, your workforce? What's that sign that something's potentially diabolical, as opposed to just, stuff happens?
Yeah, as a general rule, don't assume it's diabolic. I mean, because the demon wants you to run you down a rabbit hole, and just this problems are a part of the human condition. It's part of the effects of original sin. So we have to accept the fact that things aren't going to be perfect. But at the same time, as another principle, if it responds to prayer and not to natural remedies, well, like pills, mental health, medicine, natural remedies, health. I mean, by not natural, I mean like medicine, doctors. Exhaust that first. If it doesn't respond to that, but it responds to prayer, look for spiritual causality. If it doesn't respond to prayer, but it responds to mental health work or pills or physical fitness, whatever. If it responds to the natural side but not to prayer, just keep working that. Keep working that. Don't assume, as we said in the military, keep your head on a swivel, because you don't know where it's coming from. Be open but cautious. Be aware that the enemy's out there. When you got engagement, when you make enemy contact, you hammer. But otherwise, you back off and live a Catholic life. But that's kind of the breakdown, is how we discern how much. Now we have a built-in diagnostic into our protocol as well. But basically, we don't jump and say, "Oh no, it's a demon." Because I've made this mistake. I've seen this. I've seen exorcists make the mistake where they just pray over somebody for weeks and weeks. And it's just psychological. So part of the program is we worked into that, a diagnostic, to ferret that out, because sometimes people just need to go see their mental health. They just need to go see a mental health professional and work on some stuff psychologically. You've got some trauma you need to work through, and then come back and work on the spiritual. So when they finish the book, they either cycle it. Some people end up going for prayer. Some people end up just going into mental health. Go back to we had a guy, he was a seminarian, and said, "Hey man, look, I mean, yeah, you've got a little bit of oppression. Keep grinding it out, but keep working with your mental health professional, because you're making a lot of progress on your weekly session." And some people just cycle right back into the parish life. But don't automatically assume it is, and don't assume it isn't. Be open but cautious. Keep your head on a swivel, but look for that causality. Look for the causality.
Talking with Dr. Dan Schneider, and his book, which is available at Tan Books, The Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. Is your book about being on defense? You already know there's a problem, you've identified something, or reading through the book, you help to identify a threat? Or is it for somebody who wants to go on offense, who's not aware of an issue, but sees this tsunami of demonic in our culture, particularly here in Europe and the United States? Who's the book for in that respect?
Yeah, the book is really written for the average Catholic, and I can just give you a principle in the spiritual life, that if you get defensive in the spiritual battle, you're going to get taken to the woodshed. When I was a fighter, if you try to fight a guy and you just try to not get hit and just play defensive, he's going to push you into a corner, and he's going to beat on you. You can't stay, you got to stay moving. You got to stay on the offensive. Now, it isn't to say that you're not reckless. You have to develop your own fight style. When I train fighters, you have to get to know them. You have to know their personality. You have to know, they got to work within their own nature. Same thing in a spiritual combat. But this is not just, part of it is, putting up a defensive perimeter. What's our defensive perimeter? A prayer, a steady, predictable prayer life, a disciplined prayer life. Offensively, identifying a target when you realize that, this is a little remiss here. I'm going to double down on my prayers for this aspect of my life, whether it's my business or it's my family, this child that's struggling. Keeping constant pressure, constant work.
Let's talk just two more questions as we wrap things up. Let's bring it home to a man's home life. We're Catholic Men of America is a business organization, but of course, we're concerned with those Catholic men, and the most important part of their life is not at work. At home, they're probably married, they probably have children, maybe grandchildren. what is the importance of order in the home, more importantly, within the family, and what does it look like?
Yeah, there's a big section on spiritual authority. It's absolutely critical for men to understand. When you look at, everyone was talking about Ephesians chapter 6 and the weapons of warfare. The prelude to Ephesians 6 is Ephesians 5. Women, be subordinate to your husbands. Husband loves your wife, love your wives as Christ loved the church. In our modern society, we're focused so much on, be subordinate to. That word means upotasso. It means, it's a Greek word, upotasso. It means to be ordered under. It's a military term. It's, were you in the military?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Air Force.
Air Force. Well, that's kind of the military. We'll give you credit for that. My dad was Air Force, so I get it.
Good man.
So we pick on each other. My dad was Air Force, my brother was Navy, and I was a grunt, in the Army. So when we walk down the street, the senior ranking officer stands to the outside so that these guys walking down the street can identify who's the senior ranking officer and then who salutes who first. His outside arm has got to be free to salute, right? So that's upotasso, being ordered under. It doesn't mean that officer is a better man than you. That means he's got seniority over you. That's his office. So authority flows through office. And then the next description of the man, he has to die like Christ. He's got to be crucified like Christ to die for his family. Another imagery, if you look at the secondary meaning of this word, upotasso, it means to be under the protection of. And so for men, you have a shield. Your authority structure has two ends, to provide and to protect. And so you've been given a shield and a sword. Your job is to take your wife and your children, you push them behind you, and you're the first one to make enemy contact. You guard them through your prayers, through your holiness. But if you're looking at pornography, if you're too busy at work that you're not paying attention at home, when you work, you give everything at the office, and you come home and you sit back and ignore the family and detach, need the me time and all that, you're letting your shield down. So your job is to keep that shield up and protect your family, and to provide and to protect. And so the temptation is always going to be to lower the shield or to not want to engage, right? To abdicate my authority. The temptation, those under authority, is to always to usurp. So keeping that order in the home is very critical. And it has nothing to do with who's the smartest one, who's holier, who's more prayerful. Because 9 times out of 10, you said you got 10,000 men in your group. I bet you 9,000 of them, they would nod their heads. Their wife is holier. Their wife is more prayerful. Their wife is more virtuous. Right, their wife is got a better interior life. That has nothing to do. Perhaps they merit, and in heaven, though, our wives we'll probably be cutting the lawn and doing house chores forever for our wives, because they're going to merit a higher place in heaven. That's the whole economy of merit. That is not the way the demon sees it. The demon doesn't look at merit; he looks at authority, and it's not about. You got guys in this group that are businessmen that run their lives. They run big corporations, run their own business, and they can't figure out, does this shirt match? And their wives might tell them, hey, no, don't wear that. Don't wear that. I can't believe you said that. Don't say this. That's not usurpation. We're talking about your orientation in the spiritual realm as spiritual head of household, making that step forward. Little things, even little things. I was a helicopter pilot. And I still drive like I'm a helicopter pilot, right? So my wife's like, I don't want you to drive. I'll drive. So I don't care. I'm not macho. You can drive. But when we go to mass, I drive, because the kids need to see me. That symbolic of the father leading the children to mass. But also when you pray, you're praying from your natural law authority as head of household. The demon is very limited and bound by what God allows according to his natural law, and he must live by the rules that God has established. And part of that is respecting the office of head of household, the office of priest, the office of bishop, superior general of an order. The office is what dictates the authority structure. And for most men that are married in this group, married guys like us, it's us taking spiritual lead in the house. When we pray, when we bless our family, we bless our children, we bless our wives. When we lay hands on them and pray for them and bless them, we can do that. Don't do it over somebody else's wife or children, but over your own wife and children. You should be doing that. If you look at the Old Testament, the two places where the imposition of hands for blessing, the priest Levitical priesthood and the patriarchs, blessing their family. So that carries into the New Testament. So we need to be praying for our children. Lord, bless our children. Bless my wife. You need to be engaging at that level to undermine what the enemy's constantly trying to do. 1,000 messages a day to 1 or 2 that we're going to get them, that we're going to give them. They're getting 1,000 if they're plugged into the popular culture.
Most important thing a man can do for his family, of course, is to become a saint, to grow in holiness, and
right.
and certainly the authority that you're talking about within the family, within the home, within a business, appropriate to your state in life is crucial. Last question: assume that there's a man listening to this podcast, and he's got some sort of a crisis or chaos in his life. Maybe his marriage is in trouble. Maybe he's got a problem with his children. Maybe he's having a crisis of faith, or he's battling an addiction, or he feels under attack at work, or he can't keep up with the pace of change in the workplace with pronouns and technology and artificial intelligence, or all of these things that are happening potentially in his life. And he's really kind of on the brink in terms of his faith, his pursuit of holiness, growing in virtue, maybe even his masculinity. I know we want him to order your book, Liber Christo Model, at Tan Books. But what would you tell him to do?
I'll give him two quotes. And I know the second one I put in the book. I don't remember the first one. The first one is a phrase we would use in the Army. It was, "No one's coming, it's up to us." And so soldiers generally naturally complain, right? And if a group ever gets pinned down, the first instinct is, all we got to do is make it through the night. If we make it through tonight, someone was going to come save us. And a good NCO would always say, "No one's coming, it's up to us." So the burden is upon you. You're got to be the guy to engage. When I train fighters, and how many times I've seen these guys in the ring, and I'm like, "Hey man, you're not watching the fight, you're in the fight. You got to engage. Start with that heroic moment. Just work on that heroic moment in the morning. Get out of bed. When the alarm goes off, get up. Get the discipline." A man needs order. He needs brotherhood. He needs ritual. Look for those areas in your life where you don't have those. Put those into your life. And the second one, I quoted G.K. Chesterton in the book, that says the real soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but he loves what's behind him. So yeah, let's say that there was a little animosity towards the Iraqi army when I was there. It's natural, but I'm not there because I hate my enemy. I was there because I love my country. I love my family. I love the freedoms we enjoy. I love what's behind me. So when you're engaged in battle, don't think that someone's going to come save you. No one's coming. It's up to us. You got to be the man. You got to be the man to stand up and pick up this fight and fight your way, get yourself through it, whether it's divorce, overcoming an addiction. You have to do it. You have to man up and do this, but also do it not out of hate, out of what you're facing, but out of love for your wife, for your children, for the church. Do it out of love for what stands behind you, because those are the ones that are standing behind your shield. That's what I would tell them. And it can be done. It can be done. It's not going to be a quick fix, but you just got to grind it out. You got to grind it out.
I've been talking with Dr. Dan Schneider, who's an adjunct professor of theology at Franciscan University, a former amateur boxer, former Army helicopter pilot, Gulf War veteran, combat veteran. And we've been talking about his book, which is a great book, available from Tan Books, the Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. We'll put all of those relevant links in the show notes, make it easy for people to click through. Final thoughts that you want to share with us? Anything you want to say? If you want to pitch any other blogs or websites or ministries, whatever else is going on in your life, one final thing for you before we wrap up.
No, I just appreciate what you're doing. We need to start overlapping shields. Catholic Men of America, the different news agencies, the different groups, we all just need to keep doing what God has called us. We say in the military, and we use this in the ministry, stay in your lane, work on where God has put you, keep grinding it out. I do have a podcast with Jesse Romero every Wednesday called Liber Christo War College. We kind of have fun with this stuff and kind of engage culture where we're at with spiritual warfare. But no, buy the book if you want to buy it. If not, that's fine too. I want to help as many people as I can. And again, I'm in it for souls and not sales. If you're in it for sales, you're not going to make a lot of money selling books, writing books, but I'm here to help as many souls as I possibly can. So no, I just appreciate what you're doing, and I wish you and the men in your organization all the best. To just keep working on getting holy, become a saint. Keep working on whatever it takes to get holy, become a saint, be the man that God called you to be.
Dan, thank you for being with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing and spending your time with us today. And God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Take care.
Thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to Jeff Kassman interview Dr. Dan Schneider. Dr. Schneider is the author of the new book, The Liber Christo Method, a field manual for spiritual combat. Check it out at tanbooks.com. GoodCatholic.com is a multimedia digital content platform designed to draw you closer to God, deepen your love and understanding of the Catholic faith, and help you put your faith into action. The folks at Good Catholic believe the fullness of truth in the Catholic faith can change lives, save souls, heal marriages, protect friendships, foster inner growth, and help each of us draw closer to Christ. They recognize truth isn't relegated to one sphere of life, it should permeate, transform, and motivate us in every aspect of our lives and in everything we do. Everything they create at Good Catholic is designed to help you understand the teachings of the Catholic faith and build a personal relationship with Jesus. Sign up for a self-paced digital content series, read hundreds of informative and entertaining articles, and listen to inspiring podcasts at goodcatholic.com.
You've been listening to the Catholic Men of America podcast. Catholic Men of America is a professional business fraternity for Catholic men, and membership is free. Join us at catholicmenofamerica.com, and you'll benefit from networking and mentorship opportunities, find better employment, learn how to grow your business more quickly, and grow in virtue. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.